I will tell you, like, I would have taken a bullet for you any day. I genuinely mean it, like 100% true.
People who go into the Secret Service are of a certain mindset, caliber, whatever. The ones who still want to go to the president's detail when it's time to pick a detail, when you get there, the first thing you have to discover is that you're a nothing and a nobody. You get handed a big slice of humble pie when you come to the detail.
When it comes to leadership, what do you think is the most important thing you've learned to be a good leader?
I really boiled it down to 3 things, and for me, it's vision, discipline, and integrity. If you go into it saying, I don't need any help, you've just hamstrung yourself. I try to go in humble, hungry, and smart and say, I don't know what I'm doing here. I can fake it, but why would I?
Biomolecular resonance. What is that?
It's going to be a major disruptor. This is going to detect cancer earlier than we've been able to detect it before in the snap of a finger. You think about drugs coming into our country through vehicles. Well, we can analyze a vehicle instantaneously and tell if there's drugs in that vehicle or not. The list of possibilities is literally endless.
You were one of the best supervisors or leaders I've ever had. You never asked us to do anything that you wouldn't do. I remember specifically once you worked the midnight shift, I was day shift, I came in and somebody from my shift was running late. Something happened, which was very rare. And I asked you, I'm like, I need help. And instead of you assigning somebody else from your team to stay to help me, you stayed. You sent everybody home and you were exhausted. And you're like, I'll stay. And you stayed. And you know what you did? You stood post for me. Because you were like standing there, which is something you don't, as a shift leader, you don't do. And you did that to help me out. And you were exhausted. While I was trying to sort out, I'm like, where's my team? What's going on? And that's who you were. I guess when it comes to leadership, what do you think's the most important thing you've learned to be a good leader?
You know, I dedicated thank you for the kind words. I vaguely remember that. It
I
didn't
re-
happen very often,
I
but
remember because it was very unlikely for a supervisor to do that.
The truth is that I actually set out to write a book about leadership with a friend who was a lieutenant governor of another state, and in the process of trying to research leadership and having lived it some and experienced both good and bad leadership, I thought, well, I can write a book too, and I started reading all these books and. It was really funny when I realized I don't have a book about leadership. I got a chapter about leadership. And so I added it to this book. What I boiled it down to is the most important thing for me is that if you're seeking to be the leader, then it has to be something that you can repeat. Therefore, it has to be simple and replicatable. And so I really boiled it down to 3 things. And for me, it's vision, discipline, and integrity. I had a lot of fun writing about this because when I made it that simple, and I know a lot of people say it's not that simple, and I said, well, for me it is. You do the right thing, there's integrity. If you see what needs to be done and go after it, well, that's vision. And if you know what's supposed to be done and don't do it, well, that's no discipline. I endeavored to take all these aspects and see if I couldn't fit them into one of those 3 categories. And for me, that worked. And it helped to think about those 3 things in terms of how you go about your business, whether it's, leading at work or leading at home. You need to know where you're going, because if you don't know where you're going because you don't have the vision about where to go, or you haven't been given the vision, well, you can lead all day long, but you're not going to get to where you need to go. And without discipline, you don't get off the starting blocks. And so you have to have discipline to actually move in that right direction. And then integrity for me rounds it out, because if you don't have integrity, I don't see how you can be a good leader. Hitler, it's a little hard to say that Hitler was a bad leader. He was a great leader, but he had no integrity, which made him a terrible man. You look at some of these other world leaders, Putin and some of these others, and say, well, they're very good at moving people, at getting things done, but do they do it with integrity? Is integrity a part of their equation? And do people want to follow them because they believe in them, or because they have to? And I think that's where the division on integrity kind of comes in, because I really felt like on my shift, number one, I recruited people that I thought were outstanding, yourself included. It didn't matter to me what they looked like, or even necessarily what their reputation was, because my goal was to get people that I thought would fit in well with the culture, the mini culture that I was trying to create. And integrity was such a big part of that. Integrity played out in the fact that you showed up on time and that you had a good attitude about it. And so I thought, if I can get those players on my team, then I'm going to have the best chance of being the best that I can be. And I think that starts a kind of a cycle, that keeps repeating and feeding on itself. And I think that really helped me. On the home front, it's the same thing. I intend to lead, therefore I intend to lead well. And if I'm going to lead well, then I have to know where I want this project to go. And you've got to have discipline in loving and being intentional about that leadership. And then it's got to be done with integrity. You saw it too. These agents that go overseas and forget that they're married, and that was never going to be a part of my experience, because it would destroy what I'm trying to do at home.
It's interesting when your shift, you were bringing up your shift and you touched on this, and I realized it now when you and I were talking off camera. You had the most females on your shift. I never sat and counted. I want to be transparent. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want that to navigate how I moved through the US Secret Service. In fact, when people would ask me what was it like to be a female special agent? I was never asked that until after I left. And I
Mm.
remember thinking, I'm like, I don't know. You know, I'm not saying I didn't deal with stuff, but I paused and I'm like, you had the majority of the women on your shift.
I did.
You did.
I did. Back then, there were only a handful of shifts. I think there are more now. Not every shift had a female agent,
Yes,
but on my shift, we had.
you
I
had the
didn't count
most.
either.
I
Five or
didn't.
six at one
That's
time.
massive for that. That's
Yeah.
like that's like ginormous if we're talking about to explain it to
Well, it,
people.
it
Like
made
that's
it look like
huge.
it was something that I was doing intentionally, trying to get all the females on my shift, and that's not the case. I was recruiting the best from, we would go into these manpower meetings, manpower loosely
It's
used
like the
term.
draft. It's the
Yeah,
draft.
yeah, it was the
I'll take him,
personnel.
you take her. I don't want this guy. That's the draft.
Exactly right. You're going in. Everyone's a playing card, and we're deciding amongst the shift leaders with our boss overseeing the process of, who do you want to trade, who do you want to keep, and there
Do
was
they
this.
like pull our photos out? Because I never
They
sat in
did,
one of these,
they
and they
did.
were just like this.
Yeah, well, yeah, because we had a board with everyone's picture on it, a little
I
magnet
remember those
photo,
boards.
and so we would, it's like a draft day. That's a great
Exactly,
analogy,
draft day.
because that's exactly what we're doing, and so my habit was to over prepare for draft day, because I absolutely cared who was coming to be with me on these trips. And who am I going to advocate for? I want to advocate for everyone that comes to me. And if you get someone that's just hard to advocate for, that's no fun. So it's there's a little bit of selfishness built into this process, but I would go into those meetings very prepared to beat everybody at this game. And I felt like I did. I'm trying not to brag about it, but I had done my homework. I had done my research. And I remember one agent in particular that I went in ready to fight for. And it happened to be a female, but I had seen this agent pull a rabbit out of her hat. And what I mean is, we had gone to Chicago, and this is where President Obama was from. He had a home there, and the habit was that we did a lot of off the cuff movements. And so we called them off the record, because they were never part of the president's schedule. Therefore, we didn't have a chance to go do a full advance on wherever he was going. And so there was a lot of moving parts, and a lot of, give us at least 2 hours, and who else knows about this, that kind of thing. And so we had very short notice. We were told the night before, hey, tomorrow at lunchtime, he's going to go to this high rise building and do a press interview. And it's up on the 28th floor, something, fairly high. So I got a briefing the morning of from the agent responsible for that site. And we get there. I get step two of the briefing, we're on site. Here's what's going to happen if something goes boom, or here's a medical emergency or whatever. And I've got all this documentation. And as you know, if the president's going to spend the night somewhere, it's a whole different ballgame, really. There's a lot more logistics that go into spending that amount of time in one spot. You're on the X, and so the considerations, the resources, all the thought and planning that goes into that event is very different than if he's going to stop by McDonald's and grab a hamburger. And what this agent handed me was a packet for an overnight visit. That's what was sent to me before we left. That's what was in the truck. That was what she briefed me on. And I paused her because I realized she's got this down tight. I mean, this place has been done and overdone, and she knows it backwards and forwards. And this is one of the best briefings I've ever been given. And what is your name again? I'd never seen her before. I didn't know her. I was like, are you part of the Chicago office or are you part of the president's detail? Because I don't know you. That's how big the detail is. And she said, well, no, sir, I'm on president's detail. I just got here, a month or two ago. And I asked her, I said, when did you find out about this event happening here? And she said, well, 8 o'clock last night. And I looked at her and I said, you didn't sleep, did you? And she said, no, she thought she's in trouble. And she said, no, sir. And I said, well, it doesn't show. It doesn't show in your face. I said, but what you've handed me is outstanding. Well, I had her in mind when I went to the next draft meeting. And I said, I'm getting her on my shift. That's the caliber I want. This is, and that's what I did. And I went into that meeting, and the reason I don't forget it is because I was prepared for her to be my number one pick. And when it came time to do picks, her name didn't even come up. And so I said, perfect. And I just kept very quiet about it. And I waited till the very end and I said, oh, I'll take, and I'm not going to say her name because she would be embarrassed. And so I got her as part of our shift. But that was how that draft went. And because I saw that nobody else was playing her big, but I knew the potential and I knew what she was made of. I got her on my shift.
When you're a leader, like you're also dealing with, and I'm surmising based on my experience, very strong personalities, very dominant personas, just because you have to be very confident people that believe in themselves. You throw in badges and their guns, and you're managing everybody. Like you have to get people to comply with, you know, I do think though, I don't know, was that hard, or for the most part, do agents listen? Like, did they listen? Like, did you ever have pushback, or was everybody like, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir? Because there also was that culture where people just were like, okay, yep, whatever you say.
My experience was very successful in terms of people complying. But what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, is that, yeah, the people who go into the Secret Service are of a certain mindset, caliber, whatever. The ones who still want to go to the president's detail when it's time to pick a detail, typically type A, hard charge, go get them kind of thing. And when you get there, the first thing you have to discover is that you're a nothing and a nobody. You get handed a big slice of humble pie when you come to the detail.
Ken, well, my first day on the detail, when I showed up to the president's detail, I won't say what boss this was. I show up my first day on, I've got 8 years probably at this point. So I'm
Mm.
not like, just out of nowhere. I come in, we sit down. It was me and maybe another agent or two. I don't remember. He comes in, opens the door, sits down, looks at us. He's like, you're lucky to be here. You don't want to be here. Any questions in your mind? There's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. Welcome to the president's detail. Boom, got up and walked out. I was just like, one of the things that made you the most successful leader, in my humble pie opinion, is no one ever saw you coming. You didn't throw your weight around. You weren't allowed. You were like very like, you're like smooth. You would come in and like you had this way about you, and you would take somebody who was here and you would just bring them here. And you just had this really amazing way to get people to listen, to do what you wanted them to do without getting in their face. You were just superb at this. And like you were a great executor. And you know what? You're inspiring. You do that job and it's like, would you take a bullet to protect this person or that? I will tell you, like, and I would take a bullet for my brothers and sisters there, but I would have taken a bullet for you any day. And I genuinely mean it. Like, it's one thing to like work with someone and say like I would take a bullet for him, and that 100% true. I'd be
Amen.
like, hold on, POTUS, move, and then, ooh, KV, I got you next. Because POTUS had to be first. I mean it from like, and and it's like, that's how that place was. It's like everybody, at least I think, like everybody would die for each other.
That was true for me, and I think that was part of why I was so intentional about who I brought onto the shift.
Who would you die for?
Well, and who did I want to love? I mean, it sounds soupy, but I love those people. These are the people I still stay in touch with. These are the people that was the best time of my career. I went on to be a SAC of a field office of a division within the Secret Service. The best time in my career was as a shift leader because of that operational administrative component where I felt like I had the most impact on people's lives right there, both in terms of what I could do for them administratively and protect them from either things they didn't want to do or some of the shift leaders who just didn't pour as much into it would set their agents up for family failure because their days were split apart or they were shortchanging them all the time and just didn't realize what they were doing to them. A shortchange is when you would work the afternoon shift till 10 o'clock, and then if the next day you were working the morning shift, you had to be back for a briefing at 5:30. Well, you didn't get off till 10. It
What
means you
time
didn't
you
get
got
home till
home?
11 probably. So you weren't getting any sleep. And it just wasn't fair to do that, but it happened all the time. And if you looked across the schedules, you'd see it. You'd see short change, and some people get it a couple of times in a row or in a week. And I didn't. I tried never to shortchange anyone and get people what they wanted for their own advancement. And hey, happy agents are good agents. You keep them happy, keep them enjoying the job and enjoying what they're doing. And if they saw that I was intentional about taking care of them, well, then it just worked together, I think. And
I think you tried to keep us steady. I mean, I remember one scenario where I was heated. I mean, I was livid about something, livid. And like it was not, it was very rare for me to do that. And I picked up the phone because I thought I was gonna rip somebody's jugular out. And I called you up. I'm like, KV, I'm like, and I just unleashed. And you're like, you call me Jeannie. And you're like, Jeannie, because that was my nickname, which I didn't give myself. I just had it. And you're like, Jeannie, I want you to step back. I want you to calm yourself. And you're like, I need you to do what's right. And I need you to put these yahoos to the side that you're pissed about, because I was. And you're like, what is right and what's with your integrity? And I was just like, I know what's right, Ken, but and you're like, do what's right. And I you kind of brought me back down because I was at 1,000 feet, and you talked me through it. I got off the phone. I mean, I was like pissed, but then I went and I did what you told me to do. I'll never forget it. And I was just about ready to like,
you
you
know,
remember that, and I know you remember that clearly.
yeah,
Because I was like in the EEOB. I was in the White House making
yeah,
this phone call. I'm like,
yeah.
Ken, and you're like, no, 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 no. You're like, holster that weapon. Holster that weapon.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't see you. I knew you were
Capable.
capable, and I knew that you meant it. And I appreciated getting that phone call because
I was pissed.
that's where I wanted
But
to
I knew I
be.
could call you. I'm calling Ken because I know Ken's going to keep me
Mm.
steady. If you ever wanted to know the one quality that the most successful people in the world have, it's the art of influence. As a former Secret Service agent, I'm here to give you insights from one of the oldest and most elite security forces in the world. Influence is a skillful art that you can absolutely learn. It's all the little things you're going to do. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of fairy dust into your life. Who doesn't need that, right? We want some positivity. We want less challenges, less conflict. We want more people to say yes in our lives because it helps us get to where we want to go. And that is where influence comes in. The goal, to help you read people, influence situations, manage conflict, and make better decisions. And by the end of the course, I'm going to be drawn to you. I'm going to want to be around you. I'm also going to see you as a leader. I want to set you up for success from the get-go. This course is going to help increase your self-confidence, your self-worth, and your ability to trust and believe in yourself. And you're going to find out that you're going to be good at this. I'm Evie Poumpouras, and this is my BBC Maestro course on the art of influence. Base molecular resonance. What is that?
Yeah.
Because it's very odd. Most of the time when agents leave, they go to private security, they go to like financial institutions, executive protection. But this is something very different.
Right.
Talk to me like I'm 5.
It was really out of the blue for me too. And when I got asked to be on a technology firm's board, my first thought was, "What are they? They must be crazy to be talking to me about that, because what do I know about it?" But when I found out more, it has become one of my passions, which is, it's hard. It's a crowded field. It's hard to get into with me, and this technology company has really crept in and done well. But what it is they have figured out that base elements in our world that we've got on charts that you had to learn, at least when we were in school.
The periodic table.
The periodic table. And therefore molecules, they're giving off a resonance. They're trying to talk to us. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but they're giving off a sound and they don't know what to call it. It's resonating. It's making noise. It's vibrating. It's doing something. And you can pick it up and you can talk to it. And what they call is they like sing to it. And when they sing to it, it sings back. And so what that means is that they're able to tell when these things are talking and what level they're talking on. So what they did is they went and charted all the elements with the sound that these are giving off. And by the way, Einstein is the one who discovered this. So they charted all the elements and said, well, we could chart molecules too, because those are just elements put together. And one of the first things they realized is, hey, we could put this together to pick up on gunpowder. And so, in fact, they could. And so they've done these tests, and they can pick up a 22 caliber bullet at 75 feet. They can pick up an AR-15 magazine full of rounds about 300 yards. It crossed over from, hey, this is cool. We could pick up weapons at a great distance. What about in terms of science and being married to a woman who's beaten breast cancer? I was very curious to see where this would go. Well, they charted all the various types of cancer, and they can do an immediate test for cancer. That all they do is point this device at you. It sings to your body, and if the cancer's in there, it's going to sing back and identify itself as whatever kind of cancer it is. The list of possibilities is literally endless. They don't know all the possibilities of the things that we could detect, but you think about drugs coming into our country through vehicles. Well, we can now analyze a vehicle instantaneously and tell if there's drugs in that vehicle or not. Shipping containers.
Okay, so you have the periodic table. Elements, I guess, vibrate sound to some degree.
Something like that. They're giving off a noise.
They give off a noise. And so this company has created a device that can hear that noise.
That's right.
So that noise comes off. Does the device give the noise first to make the elements give a noise?
They do. So the device will, and for lack of a better term, the device sings.
Okay. To whatever object.
Looking to see in a designated space, is there anything singing back at singing the same song? And if it is, that means that is there. So
based off of whatever it's pointing at, let's say it's pointing at a bullet, it knows to sing a certain song to that specific bullet. Yeah. Or is it the same song? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, you have to set it to what you want to detect. So if you want to detect, and I'm thinking about, say the White House, now maybe we want to stop drugs from coming into the White House. It hadn't been an issue in the past, but we want to stop bad stuff. So you train dogs, you set up metal detectors. We train dogs on all these different things that they're sniffing for. And I don't remember how many things they sniff for, but we could set up a device to sing all of those songs. And if they get a singing back from an approaching object, well, then they know that one of those elements is there. Now they can dial it down to a single. Hopefully we can also build a device that also will do multiple at the same time. So it's very exciting. You can tell I get excited about it
I
because
think
of
it's
the
amazing.
possibilities that are out there for bad stuff. I want to be able to detect cancer before current technology can pick it up, and it can. I want to be able to pick up weapons coming into a school before they even get on school grounds, or certainly before they get to the school. I would love to be, have these devices in a police car that when they pull over a suspicious vehicle, they know there's a weapon in that car because the base molecular resonance is happening, and so they know they will at least know there's ammo in that car.
You know the most dangerous job function of a police officer is?
Well, I've heard that domestic violence calls are the most
They're
dangerous
up
thing.
there, but
Yeah,
it's traffic stops.
traffic stops. Yeah,
Traffic stops are the most dangerous thing that police officers do because you don't know who you're pulling over. You don't know if it's their car. You
right.
don't know what's in the car.
And wouldn't it be great to know ahead of time there's no weapons? At least, it would be difficult to say there's no knives, but you could certainly say there's no guns in here.
Yeah. That's interesting too. You brought up cancer. And I'm genuinely sorry to hear about your wife, but she's doing well, that
She's
I
doing
know.
great.
My father had cancer, and for a very long time, he would go to the doctors, and he would have this pain, and he's like, "This hurts, and it hurts." He kept going to the doctor. Nope, it's nothing's there. He went to another doctor. Nothing's there. And I remember it's hard for me to say it. Came home one day, and he was in the garden, and his pain was so bad. He put a belt and he tied it around his
Mm,
waist to squeeze his side. And he's like, "I'm just hurting." And I was like, "Dad, this something's not right."
mm,
And no doctor could find what was wrong with him. And finally, we pushed, and they gave him some type of scan. It escapes me at the moment. And then when they did that, they said, "Oh, you have pancreatic cancer." And this this man, like my dad, kept going and going and going to the point like we took him to the doctor because he just couldn't, you know.
yeah,
And you think of something like that where maybe, and I know pancreatic cancer is terrible, but you think of so many people who suffer and like how you can actually catch something like this in advance. And but they caught it. My dad died within 2 months. Within
yeah,
2 months of being diagnosed, my dad passed away, and I think it's not like he just realized it for the longest time. And just, when I think of
mm,
the pain and the suffering of that so many people go
yeah.
through, like, wow, what that would do.
And what
Is it
are
is it because the cancer sings?
Yeah, the molecules, the cancer molecules are talking to us. We just have to know how to listen, and now we know how to listen. And the vision is that you would go in for your annual checkup, a routine checkup, and they would have the ability to, you're just sitting on the table, and they could scan you instantaneously for every form of cancer that we know of, and you would know immediately if there's cancer, to anything to follow up on in the cancer realm. And the same is true with COVID. They can test for COVID. They could test for
COVID sings?
COVID sings. I have a worldview about this, and it's like, of course, all of creation is trying to speak to us, and we just have to know how to listen. I think it's so cool. It's in my, of course, that's how that works. And so I'm very excited. One of the hardest things though is to know, like with your dad and with my wife, that we have the ability to detect the cancer now. We just don't have it out in production. It's going to take a minute to get there, but it's coming.
What are you doing with them, you specifically?
Well, I'm on
Not
the
that I don't think you're worthy of it, but I'm kind of like, "Hey, nah."
well, I was asked to be on the board of advisors, and so they're looking to me both from the husband of a cancer survivor, but also from a security standpoint. And so they want to know what applications, how would that work, what does it look like, what are the legal ramifications, all this kind of stuff that goes into when you're trying to break into a market where, frankly, a lot of people are not going to want you to break in, because we're going to ruin a lot of people's business because
Big pharma with cancer.
well, I don't know which ones, but certainly, this is going to detect cancer earlier than we've been able to detect it before, in the snap of a finger. And so, yeah, it's going to, a lot of people are not going to like it.
I like that.
It's going to be a major disruptor. They set up a demo at a hotel, and showed some investors, and they got all excited. And then I don't know how it happened, but it gives off a low, what they call it, ultra low frequency. So it's like an AM radio. So it's not, it's won't hurt anything. And they had it pointed toward the wall, and it went off. And some of the investors were saying, "Oh, false positive." Well, what are you doing about false positives? And they're like, "There's no such thing as a false positive." So they went out, they left the room, they went next door, they knocked on the door. There's two guys in there, and they said, "Hey, sorry to bother you, but one of you dealing with prostate cancer?" And one of the guys said, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" Well, we've got this device, and it told us that you do.
Have cancer.
Yeah.
That reminds me of when I would do, and you probably came across this when we would do, you know how we would scan for like radiation, like nuclear weapons or different things at events. And when we would do that, we would, when people would come through and some people would ping the sensory,
Bing, bing, bing.
and what we would find was that that person had just gone through radiation treatment
Yeah.
for cancer.
Yep.
And
Or major x-rays, and it was still in their system.
that was in their system. And I remember this one big event that I did, a massive event. And it was like thousands of people that the president was going to go speak at. It's like some stadium, and we actually created a way to identify people who would ping the device. Because even in the stadium, we would have individuals going through with these devices that detected radiation,
Mhm.
and we don't want them picking on those same people, like moving through the crowd. So we would give them a pin, a special pin to identify them, so that you knew this person had just had radiation treatment. That's why they were hitting on the device.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
that was amazing that
Yeah.
that would happen. This sounds like remarkable. And it's what's the company called?
It's called Base Molecular Resonance Technologies, BMRT, and their website's bmrt.io.
And where are they at now with all of this?
Well, they've got multiple prototypes of the devices that are working, and they've done multiple tests, and they've showed that it does work. And so now the question is, how do we branch out, and how do we bring this to bear on the problems that exist and start detecting bad stuff, and what does that look like? We're at an interesting time. It's grown up to a certain point, and now it's really time for the rubber to meet the road and see what we're going to do with it. But we've already got a lot of interest from our government, obviously, because they want to detect drugs and bad stuff coming in, but also from a security standpoint, military standpoint, all of those fields, there are applications for that. One of the coolest things I heard was you could scan a, a field of cows, because there are certain diseases that herds of cattle, if one cow gets the disease, like mad cow disease or something like that, you
Yes.
have to kill the entire thing. So they want to keep that out. So they can detect it earlier. Now they could detect it before one of those gets into the herd, or if they're really suspicious, they could go ahead and prove that, yeah, it is in this herd, and we need to do the right thing. So the applications are just, they're crazy endless.
Who created this device? You brought up Einstein before.
Einstein and Tesla were the ones who came up with the original theory about these base molecular entities giving off a resonance. And that's where the name came from, base molecular resonance. And it kind of morphed from there. There was an Air Force pilot who was interested in this and followed up on it, and built that up. And, then that idea kind of got bought. And now it sits in the hands of a company called Base Molecular Resonance Technology, and so Bo Short and Lee Duke are the ones who lead that up, and are heading that, and so I got put on their board. But just terrific people that want the very best for humanity, enhance our ability to detect bad stuff, whether it's medical, security, or military, and make us safer and better.
Have you seen the device?
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, is this a small device? Is this huge?
It's not very big at all. It's very portable, handheld.
And you just point and you scan?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, if you go to bmrt.io, you can watch it's almost like a homemade video of the device being used, and they show exactly what happens when you enter a 22 caliber bullet.
I wonder if people would have that in their house, like somebody, knocks on your doorbell, especially with home invasions and crime, or If you want to know if your kid has drugs on them, you just point the thing at the person coming in and you scan
I
them.
think
Like,
you just came up with a new,
I would for parents. I was
a
remember
new
we were talking about,
application.
yeah, you just scan your kid. What were you doing? Were you out doing anything? You just scan your kid to see if
Yeah.
anything's on them.
No, that's great. I think you're right. See, and that's why we need a diverse set of people on this board. And it really is a diverse group of people that are coming with ideas that it's like, well, I hadn't thought about that. And that's a great idea.
Well, I mean, schools, you brought up schools.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't like to think about that when you look at the age group that commits the most crime. The age group historically that commits the most crime is 18 to 25. That's who commits the most crime in the US. So sometimes when I watch the news or I'm on the news and they're like, "Oh my goodness, Evie, this kid's only 19. Look what happened with the police." And he's just a kid. And I'm like, you don't know your data. And when you
You
look at
try to act surprised.
I I try to act surprised, and it's sad, but that's why you have that is the majority of who commits crime, 18 to 25-year-olds. And then at 25, there's a drop off. For whatever reason, and there's a lot of different theories why crime drops off at 25. But even as a college professor, there's no mags in my school. There's no, knock on wood, man, I had one incident that we had to handle, but there was a mental health issue with that student. But students come in and you don't know what they're bringing, you don't know what they're carrying, and part of my job is also create a safe environment. So I could see that being a massive thing, and just even the idea of having magnetometers, just the psychological idea of, because a lot of people like harden up the schools, harden up the schools. You can do that, but it's also what message does that send when, as a kid, you're coming to school and you have to go through a magnetometer? It almost amplifies things
Yeah.
a bit and creates
Plus,
more stress.
we usually put magnetometers for school purposes inside the school. And this technology would pick up
Outside.
far outside. Yeah, before, and so you go into lockdown before they even get to the school,
Yes.
and that would be helpful.
If you're easily offended, you are easily manipulated. So let's fix that. As your former Secret Service agent, I'm here to give you insights from one of the oldest and most elite security forces in the world. Influence is a skillful art that you can absolutely learn. It's all the little things you're going to do. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of fairy dust into your life. Who doesn't need that, right? We want some positivity. We want less challenges, less conflict. We want more people to say yes in our lives because it helps us get to where we want to go. And that is where influence comes in. The goal: to help you read people, influence situations, manage conflict, and make better decisions. And by the end of the course, I'm going to be drawn to you. I'm going to want to be around you. I'm also going to see you as a leader. I want to set you up for success from the get-go. This course is going to help increase your self-confidence, your self-worth, and your ability to trust and believe in yourself. And you're going to find out that you're going to be good at this. I'm Evie Poumpouras, and this is my BBC Maestro course on the art of influence. What is the greatest tactical advantage you think that you've gotten from being a U.S. Secret Service special agent, and you were a supervisor, compared to other agencies? Again, we're not competing, but we're just like, what's the greatest tactical advantage you got?
One of the biggest differences that I saw was that a lot of federal agencies will come into a law enforcement situation that might include local, state, other federal, and say we're in charge. And they come in and kind of boot everybody out. We're now in charge, and
We won't say what agencies
we
do
won't say
that.
what agency, but and a lot of people have that impression. They that's almost what they expect. And the Secret Service culture is so different because of the protection mission. We know ahead of time that we can't do it without help. So every scenario we go into for a protection advance, if the president's going to Des Moines, Iowa, or to Russia, or to Africa, or to you name it, the first thing we do is go and ask for help. We don't clear the room and say we're in charge. We go and fill the room with everyone that can help us to solve this problem ahead of time.
So true.
And so I consider that a tactical advantage to go in humble, and it's not false humility. It's true humility to say we can't do this on our own. we have to have your help. So please help. In fact, you tell us how you would do it if you were in charge. And it's our responsibility, but we're asking for your collaboration. And look, that was the funnest part of the job, was collaborating. I loved going to towns. I still keep in touch with cops from all over the world that we went into, and they expected us to be high and mighty and treat them differently, but we went in saying, no, not only do can you not leave, but you have to stay, and we need your help. How would you do this? And I think that was great. That has bled over, I think, into my life, because no matter what it is, whether you're writing a book or doing a job, if you go into it saying, I don't need any help, well, you've just hamstrung yourself. And you see people do that. I mean, you've seen that. We've all seen that. But for me, maybe it just plays into my personality a little bit, but I try to go in humble, hungry, and smart and say, I I don't know what I'm doing here. I can fake it, but why would I? How about if you help me and then I get to know you and learn from you how to do my job, and that's a win-win. So I think that's a huge advantage, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm so glad that that's. I hope that that's still the truth. That was absolutely true my entire career. No matter where we went in asking for help because we knew that we had to have it.
You know, I agree with you because they actually taught us, especially in New York, we had to work with a lot of agencies, NYPD, like DSS, everybody. And the one thing that was beat into me is like you ask for help and you work nice with everybody. I that was like you play nice with everybody. No boss wanted to hear that you were a bully, that you flexed your muscle. It was actually a huge no-no. It wasn't like you go show them you're in charge. And if it got back to supervisor that you didn't play nice, you got in trouble.
It was
I
part of every briefing, even when I remember the vice president's detail came to Louisville, and I don't remember what my responsibility for that was, but I remember I got up at the briefing and explained to them, to all of our out of town guests from the vice president's detail. And it was true no matter what was president's detail or a former president's detail, to say, don't you go mess up my relationships, because we've got outstanding relationships here. It's very collaborative in nature, and don't go ruining it. So, and I remember we showed up at Jackson Hole because Vice President Cheney
Oh,
lived out there,
yes,
had a home out there. And the agent who was assigned out there was just, he was a huge defender of the relationship out there. And so I went out there on a presidential advance, and I was doing the motorcade for President Bush, who was going from the Olympics in Salt Lake City to Jackson Hole to stay with a friend of his. And this guy came into our briefing and he said, all right, all you PPD, I won't fill in the rest of it, but don't you go screwing up my relationships, because the vice president's out here, you know, frequently. We've got a good thing here and we do not want it ruined. And you will answer to me if show your tail here. So don't do it.
When I worked cases and I would sometimes have to work with the New York City Police Department. And so that's a local agency, and a lot of locals don't like to work with federal. And I would come in, I'd say, hi, I'm Special Agent so and so. I'd show my creds. Can I speak to detective, whatever? And you could see them like, what do you want? One of the things I learned eventually to say is, I'm US Secret Service. And I would say that, and sometimes I would say, I'm not this agency. There were certain ones that had unfortunately, like kind of a bad reputation of not playing well. And I was like, please let them know I'm US Secret Service. Here are my creds. And after I would say that, somebody would come down. But up until I made it a point to say what agency I was with, like I would sit there in the lobby, I would wait. One time they had me waiting for half an hour, and I finally said, did you hear that a US Secret Service? Like, I know I'm not federal. I'm not really federal. I'm not really the federal. I'm one of the outliers,
One
and
of the good ones.
I'm one of the okay ones. And it was a big deal. it massively, people don't want to play with you. They don't want to work with you if
Hey,
you're an ass.
we had our bad apples too. I mean, it wasn't like everyone was great,
No,
and so
that's true.
it, you know,
But
when it,
you stuck out.
you did, and that's the truth. You know, I think people who come into the Secret Service who somehow make it through the filters and still carry with them some I'm better than them bravado or whatever it might be. It doesn't last long
No,
because
and
you
you
will
won't
get
last long.
beat down. Your reputation's everything in the Secret Service, and if it doesn't fit within that culture of humility and putting others first and doing the right thing, you just don't last long.
Long-term effects of the job. I actually heard recently, and I don't know if you had heard this. There were actually a couple agents that committed suicide. Had you heard this?
Well, I've known of two that were friends of mine that took their own lives. So
I'm sorry.
mm.
I know of one when I was working. I remember. Um, but I guess I don't know if this ties into it or not. But what long-term effects do you think there are with the job?
I would love to say that, of course, there are no long-term effects. They're all good. I think though, probably it's going to depend on how you dealt with the things that were going on when they went on. And so I point to marriages. A marriage that is destroyed in the process of a career. In my opinion, just not worth it. That shouldn't be the cost of a career. I certainly saw examples of marriages that were dissolved that might not have might not have undergone the same stress, the same heat, the same kind of pressures that another job might have. And I've certainly seen marriages dissolved. There was supposedly a stat that said law enforcement has the highest divorce rate of all professions, and that the Secret Service has the highest divorce rate in all of law enforcement. I have no idea if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard. And I would say that you get in one of these careers that it's got all this appeal and it's frankly fun. I'd have done it for free, but if you're not aware of what it's doing to you or to your family, to your spouse, uh, what a shame. If you're just blind to that or you're willfully ignorant of that, then that's a problem, and it will force cracks in that foundation eventually. And I think the pressure of the job maybe exacerbates that those cracks if they're there. And so I recommend counseling for counseling used to be quite a no-no. You don't want to do counseling. It's free. The government offers that for free, and there's a reason why they offer that. And so if that's necessary, maybe it's you don't know it's necessary until it's too late. But at least in my case, my wife and I did. I'll just call them marriage builder retreats. Um, and they were through church. We would go to these seminars and it's all about building a healthy relationship and building that strong marriage. I think those were worth their weight in gold, really, because I think they gave us a common talking point for problems and issues. And I think for us, I remember giving Sandra more or less veto power on the career. And I told her if it comes right down to it, I can go do something else. I mean, I can do lots of other things. We found the appropriate tension in there. We found the right tension in that chord, and found that certainly our common faith has a lot to do with that. We've got this same faith that we hold on to, and we turn to that. I think both individually and as a couple for help and strength in difficult situations. And I remember 3 times on the president's detail offering to quit and saying, "Hey, I'll quit. You say the word, and I'll quit," because things just weren't going well, and that happens. It's just part of it. But there's it's almost like getting married. There's normal jitters, and then there's the abnormal jitters. And if you're experiencing the abnormal jitters, then they've got to be addressed. And when they're not addressed, then you got problems.
When I got married, my husband at the time, he was with Department of Homeland Security. I'm with Department of Homeland Security. So I'm thinking, oh, one of the agencies is gonna transfer one of us to be together. I get married, we have a honeymoon, like which I scheduled like months ahead because you have to schedule all your leave. And I go to my superiors. Actually, I won't forget. I went to my superior and I said, "Sir, I got married. I married another special agent. He's with Homeland." And the superior looks at me. He's like, "Is there any a way for me to try to be in the same state?" Because my husband and I were in different states, and he's, to live together. And he says, living together is overrated. And that was
Wow.
the end of that discussion. I remember it. And then my husband went to his superiors, and they pretty much told him, go pound sand. And for almost 4 years, I was married, and my husband lived in one state, and I lived in one state. And, it was hard.
It's hard.
It was very hard. We did it. Um, Nobody cared.
Mm.
Nobody cared. I mean, I understood it though. I also knew I'm like, I don't know if they're going to help. It took it 4 years. We did it. We managed. And he also understood it. So I think maybe because he did the same job I did from a different angle.
Mm.
But yeah, I feel that tremendously.
I bet that doesn't sound right. And certainly we've changed. Hopefully things are getting better. I don't know if they are in that realm. I can tell you, we haven't had so many kids. We experienced the maternity leave thing was different back then. There was no applause when we had a baby on a Wednesday and I was back to work on Friday. It's just what you did. Because as we talked early on, me calling in sick meant that somebody had to come to
Somebody better
work on their
be.
day off.
Was it you're either on your way? If you're calling in sick, you're either in the hospital or on your way to the hospital.
Yeah.
That's what had to
Yeah.
be. The majority of what we hear today is stay away from stress, stay away from tension, stay away from, right? You want everything nice and smooth, but you say tension.
Tension to me is not a bad word. And tension usually means war or, political parties going at each other, that kind of thing. But, too much tension and you break the rope, and that's not good. You don't want to be there. You don't want to put so much stress on the rope that you actually break it. But a loose, limp rope is really no good. And I use the example of rock climbing because that's what I used to do in college. I enjoyed that. And if you're serving as the belay for a fellow rock climber, you've got to keep that rope a little bit tight because if when they're climbing they fall, you don't want them falling so far that they would invert or hit something or, a little fall is good, but you don't want them to fall too far. So you got to keep enough tension. And so they talk about a sleepy belay. A sleepy belay is when there's rope sitting on the ground and your climber's way up there. Well, that shouldn't be. You got to pull the tension on the rope and get it to where they know you got them. At the same time, if you pull too hard on that rope, you can pull them off the rock. So you got to find that appropriate tension. And I think that's true in life. I think it's true professionally. I think it's true personally. You've got to find that sweet spot of a balanced life and balance your ropes in all those facets of life to have that right tension.
If you had to give one piece of advice, what would that be?
I can tell you what has resonated with me: direction over perfection. As long as you're moving in the right direction, let go of perfection, because if we stop and analyze every little thing, and if we fret over every detail, and if we are so wrapped around the axle of perfection, you miss going in the right direction. And I say, let go of the little stuff, keep your eyes on the prize, focus on the big stuff, and move in that direction, and the little stuff will go away. And so I say direction beats perfection.
What can you do to improve your self-awareness? Number one, shut up. As your former Secret Service agent, I'm here to give you insights from one of the oldest and most elite security forces in the world. Influence is a skillful art that you can absolutely learn. It's all the little things you're going to do. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of fairy dust into your life. Who doesn't need that, right? We want some positivity. We want less challenges, less conflict. We want more people to say yes in our lives because it helps us get to where we want to go. And that is where influence comes in. The goal? To help you read people, influence situations, manage conflict, and make better decisions. And by the end of the course, I'm going to be drawn to you. I'm going to want to be around you. I'm also going to see you as a leader. I want to set you up for success from the get-go. This course is going to help increase your self-confidence, your self-worth, and your ability to trust and believe in yourself. And you're going to find out that you're going to be good at this. I'm Evie Poumpouras, and this is my BBC Maestro course on the art of influence. So I have a question actually about the White House. This is coming in from my producer. Ghosts in the White House. Are there any paranormal activity? Because I've heard stories. I'm not going to say anything. You were there a lot longer than I was. KV, what do you know? Do you know anything? Had you heard anything?
I know some stuff. I don't know how to explain some stuff, but I
Go
know
ahead.
some stuff.
She's gonna love this.
Look, I'm just giving you the facts. We were working the midnight shift one night, and everyone heard this noise. It was big and it was loud, very loud, and everyone's obviously on alert. You know, what was that? What just happened? Because a lot of times on the inside, you can hear stuff on the outside, and you're not sure if that was a car accident or if that was a gun or, you know, just what it was. And it's just so hard to tell, especially if you're on the inside. And so we hear this boom, and obviously we did what we took up our normal protocol for, well, there's potentially a problem here. What are we going to do? And I was the midnight shift leader. So it's kind of on me, you know, everyone's looking at me, what are you going to do? And so, I started walking around trying to get toward where the noise was and figure out what do we have a problem? And if so, what is it? And honestly, it sounded to me like a very large piece of furniture got knocked over somehow upstairs, but kind of high up. And so I went around to the uniform officers because they are the real experts at the White House. You know, they're the ones who live there and work their whole career there and just know it backwards and forwards. And so I went to them and they said, yeah, I've never heard anything quite like that. And so I actually, and this is dead middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m. And so I started walking around. I actually went up into, you know, where all the lights are off and people are sleeping and you know, just trying to make sure that everything's okay. There are no panic alarms going off. There's no other indicator of a problem except for this very loud boom that happened. And everyone's account seemed to suggest that it was inside the White House. And so I got to see parts of the White House that night I had never seen. I walked into rooms with a flashlight that I had never been in, and I'm just trying to investigate what's wrong here. What's amiss? Who knocked over what at 3 a.m? And I found nothing. I could not find anything anywhere. And I finally went to the uniform division, Secret Service uniform division supervisor, who had now come over because they have supervision for the entire grounds. So he's now come into the mansion, and I said, hey, I don't know what that was. I'm ready to write it off, but it's still weirding me out a little bit that it was that loud and that there's nothing to see here. We can't find anything. There's no other problem, no other bell or whistle going off, no other indicator of a problem. And he said, you know, I don't know what to tell you, but every now and then we hear stuff and there's no explanation for it. And he said when they reconstructed the White House in about 1950, it was very important to them at that time that the White House remain. So they left the outer walls of the White House, but they've got pictures of cranes inside the White House. And they left the facade there, but built a new White House inside that facade. And he said there are actually, you know, things from that old construction that it's taken this long, but they fall and they're inside the walls, and sometimes they make noise. And it's like, well, let's go with that explanation because I don't know what else to call this, but it was definitely weird.
Oh my God, that's
Strange noises, and I never saw anything, didn't nothing like that. But that one night we did get spooked a little bit.
yeah. I would hear keys sometimes and footsteps, and I just
Mm.
didn't know. But then I'd go look, and then nothing. I didn't have any, but there were moments where at night, midnight shift, certain posts where you're just kind of like, did you not feel that? There were moments where you're just kind of a little bit of a, right? I
That
don't know.
definitely, and I as a shift leader, I had a little more freedom to wander, and so I did wander a little bit. Just kind of looking if there's anything out of place, and making sure because usually, at least at night back then, it was just us and the
Nobody else.
Obamas.
Yeah.
There were no custodians, there were no electricians,
No.
there were no
Everyone would leave.
staff, there wasn't anyone there, and so I would just kind of wander around, and it was so cool to be in those rooms and think about the history that's taken place in those rooms, and so it was a little spooky to be in those spaces by yourself, really wandering
Well,
around to
it's like
see
a
it.
museum in there.
It really
It
is, yeah.
really is. I remember once I was with the first lady, she was home, and then I think it's as innocent. The two daughters came down, Malia, Sasha, and they were with their friends. They would do like sleepovers. They were trying to be kids, and they brought a ball and they start like kicking the ball in the hallway outside of our where our down room was. And I get on the radio and I'm like, somebody get the curator here because they're gonna knock one of these like George Washington statues.
Oh yeah.
And so I remember I'm like, you guys need to come out here. And they just came out and they just started like picking up all this stuff because they're kids. It's
The
their
Ming
home.
Dynasty vases and the
Oh my
all
God,
the stuff
yes.
that the kids are going to
There's
knock
like
over.
serious, like you would just stand there and like lean on something, and then it's like from like
Yeah.
hundreds of years ago. And
Yeah.
I just was, but
That was
that
a
was your
gift from the Marquis de Lafayette. It's broken on the floor over there.
It's so true. Well, I used to do access control and they did White House tours. And one of the things that when they would have people come in from tours or even people that would visit as guests, they'd steal stuff from the White House.
Mm.
Doorknobs would go missing, I found out, little pieces of crystal from the chandelier. So people would come for either parties or something and they would steal stuff. And the White House would actually have to like replace little key things. I mean, people go to the bathroom and they would steal like the knobs or little things from the bathroom just to take home. I guess I always felt so lucky. So I'd always hit up the butlers and the people like that knew the history. We were kind of like, I don't want to say the knuckle draggers, but we were a little bit like, hi, I'm here to keep you alive. But there was
Well,
so much information,
yeah.
from the butlers. I used to see, remember the butlers? And I forget their names, but there was one gentleman. He was probably the oldest of the butlers, and he would come down. He would bring the elevator down, then he'd sit down because he would get tired.
Yeah.
What was his name? Ken, do you
I
remember?
don't. I know who you're talking about.
They
Just
had good stories
the kindest
because he was
gentleman.
there from like Lyndon Johnson or something. And I
Yeah,
was
I've
like,
been there
how
a
many
long time.
presidents have you done? And he's like, oh, I could tell you stories, but he never told. He never told. He never told. So,
Yeah, there was some sense that we, the Secret Service, were the necessary evil in the house. In a perfect world, we wouldn't be there. We wouldn't be necessary or needed. And so a lot of people saw us as we're the help. Hey, and that was fine. But I think in the broader society, I think we're a little more accepted. The fact that just goes with it now. But I think certainly from a staff perspective, it's like, well, wish you guys didn't have to be here all the time, but
sometimes people, yeah, they were like,
but then
it's
when
true.
things didn't go well, they were sure glad we were around.
Everybody, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ken.
Okay.
KV?
Yes.
Ah, man. Thank you, KV.
You bet.
44 years ago, Mark Brandenburg's 17-year-old sister Brenda was found murdered in a Texas field. The killer was never found, and the case went cold. No justice, no answers.
Brenda doesn't deserve that. The family doesn't deserve that. And really, frankly, if we're going to do it, we got to do it now.